Story number 1. Whispers in Devil's Den. I've always been captivated by the allure of the unknown, the secrets that lie hidden beneath the veneer of everyday life. So when my friends Mark, Lisa, and Jason and I decided to embark on a weekend camping trip to Devil's Den Forest in Arkansas, it felt like the perfect adventure. Nestled deep within the Ozarks, Devil's Den is infamous for its rugged terrain, stunning rock formations, and a myriad of local legends that speak of restless spirits and unexplained phenomena. Little did we know, our excitement would soon give way to a nightmare we couldn't escape. It was late September, the air crisp with the first hints of autumn. When we arrived at the forest's edge, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows that danced across the dense foliage. We had spent the afternoon hiking through the winding trails, the sounds of our laughter and conversation blending with the symphony of the wilderness around us. As dusk turned to night, we decided to set up camp near a particularly large oak tree, its branches sprawling like the arms of a giant, providing ample shade and a perfect vantage point for stargazing. Building our makeshift treehouse had been a project we'd tackled together, a blend of excitement and creativity that left us with a sturdy structure high above the forest floor. With the basics secured: sleeping bags, a small camping stove, and a few personal items, we settled in for the night, the flickering light of our lantern casting eerie shadows on the treehouse walls. The first night was peaceful, the sounds of the forest lulling us into a sense of calm. We shared stories, laughed at old memories, and marveled at the clarity of the night sky. But as midnight approached, an unsettling stillness descended upon the forest, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. It was then that we heard it, a faint scratching sound, rhythmic and deliberate, coming from outside the treehouse. Mark, ever the curious one, grabbed his flashlight and peered out the window. "Probably just a raccoon or something," he muttered, though his voice betrayed a hint of unease. Lisa and Jason nodded in agreement, trying to shake off the creeping sense of dread that was beginning to settle in. But the scratching didn't stop, continued, growing louder and more insistent, as if someone or something was desperately trying to get our attention. I felt a chill run down my spine, the air growing colder despite the warm layers we had worn for the evening. Mark stepped away from the window, determination etched on his face. "I'm going to check it out," he declared, grabbing his jacket and heading towards the door. "Stay here, guys." I exchanged worried glances with Lisa and Jason, both of us silently pleading for him to reconsider. But Mark was resolute, his curiosity overpowering any sense of caution. We watched as he disappeared into the darkness, the scratching sound following him until he was just a shadow among the trees. Minutes passed, each one stretching longer than the last. The scratching persisted, now accompanied by a low, mournful whine that seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath us. My heart pounded in my chest, every instinct urging me to follow Mark. But fear held me back. Lisa grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with terror. "We should go after him," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the eerie sounds outside. Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed through the treehouse, the sound of something large and heavy striking the structure. Mark emerged from the darkness, his face pale and his breath shallow. He looked around, eyes darting nervously as the scratching ceased abruptly. "There's nothing out there," he said, his voice shaky. "Just trees and rocks." But the relief was short-lived. As we settled back into our positions, the silence was shattered by a chilling sight. Through the window, we saw a figure standing just beyond the tree line, a woman in a flowing white dress, her face obscured by the shadows. She stood motionless, staring directly at our treehouse with eyes that seemed to burn with an unnatural light. "Who is she?" Jason breathed, his voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, the figure began to move, slowly advancing towards us with deliberate steps. The temperature plummeted, frost forming on the edges of the windowpane as the woman drew nearer. Panic surged through me as I grabbed my flashlight, aiming it towards her. But the beam barely penetrated the darkness surrounding her. As she reached the base of our tree, her face became visible, a pale, expressionless visage with eyes that glowed like embers in the night. She raised a hand, pointing directly at us, her fingers elongated and claw-like. Without warning, she vanished, the air around us growing still once more. Mark, Lisa, and Jason stared in stunned silence, the gravity of the situation sinking in. The local legends had warned us about Devil's Denver, about the spirits that haunted its depths, but we had dismissed them as mere folklore. Now, faced with the reality of a restless spirit, fear took hold of us. "We need to leave," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. We began to pack up our belongings, the sense of urgency propelling us into action. But as we descended from the treehouse, the ground beneath us began to tremble, cracks spiderwebbing through the once solid earth. From these fissures, dark smoke billowed, carrying with it the acrid scent of burning coal and decay. The forest around us seemed to come alive, the trees twisting and contorting as if responding to an unseen force. "What's happening?" Jason cried, his eyes wide with terror. Before we could react, the treehouse began to sway violently, the structure creaking and groaning under the immense pressure. We stumbled backwards, the ground shifting beneath our feet as the air filled with the sound of distant, tormented wails. It was as if the forest itself was crying out in pain, the spirits of Devil's Den seeking release from their eternal torment. Desperate to escape, we ran through the forest, the path we had taken earlier now unrecognizable, swallowed by the encroaching darkness and shifting terrain. The sounds of our footsteps were drowned out by the cacophony of spirits crying out for help, their anguish a constant presence that haunted our every step. Hours seemed to pass as we navigated the maze of the haunted forest, the fear and exhaustion driving us forward. Just as hope began to wane, we emerged from the dense trees, the first light of dawn breaking through the horizon and dispelling the shadows that had held us captive. We looked back, but Devil's Den had returned to its former stillness, the treehouse nowhere to be seen, as if it had never existed. Breathing heavily, we collapsed onto the soft grass, the memories of that night etched into our minds like a dark scar. The legends of Devil's Den were no longer just stories to us. They were a terrifying reality that we had narrowly escaped. As we made our way back to civilization, the forest stood silent once more, the spirits of the lost bound to its depths, their whispers lingering in the air as a haunting reminder of the night we faced the unknown and survived. Years have passed since that fateful trip, but the memory of Devil's Den remains vivid, a testament to the thin veil that separates our world from the supernatural. Sometimes, when the wind rustles through the trees and the first light of dawn casts long shadows across the land, I can almost hear the faint echoes of laughter and the desperate whispers of restless spirits, a lingering reminder that some places are meant to be forgotten, their secrets buried deep within the heart of the wilderness. Story number 2. The Second Room. I've always been drawn to the forgotten places, those hidden corners where time seems to stand still and secrets lie buried beneath layers of neglect. So when my partner, Emily, and I stumbled upon the old treehouse nestled in the heart of a massive oak in rural Maine, felt like destiny. We had been exploring the dense woods behind her family's farmhouse, seeking adventure and a break from our monotonous routines. Little did we know, the treehouse held more than just memories of childhood play. It harbored a darkness that would forever change our lives. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when we first discovered the treehouse. The sun filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. The oak stood tall and imposing, its branches sprawling like the arms of a giant. Perched high above, the treehouse was a quaint structure, weathered by years of exposure to the elements. Its wooden planks were splintered, and the roof sagged under the weight of moss and lichen. Despite its dilapidated state, there was an undeniable charm to it, a relic of simpler times when Emily's siblings and I had spent countless hours there, dreaming up fantastical worlds. As we approached, a sense of unease settled over me. There was something different about the treehouse today, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The air grew colder, the vibrant colors of fall muted by an inexplicable gloom that seemed to emanate from the structure itself. Emily, ever the curious one, reached out to touch the worn railing, her fingers brushing against the rough wood. "Do you feel that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, the chill in the air sending shivers down my spine. "Yeah, it's like the temperature just dropped." We decided to investigate, pushing open the creaky door that protested with a loud screech. The interior was dark, the only light filtering through the gaps in the walls and roof. Dust motes floated in the beam of Emily's flashlight as we stepped inside, our footsteps echoing ominously in the empty space. The treehouse was cluttered with remnants of past occupants, old toys, faded photographs, and scattered papers that seemed to tell fragmented stories of laughter and joy long gone. As we explored, Emily's flashlight caught something peculiar on the far wall. A door, slightly ajar, concealed behind a tattered curtain. My heart pounded in my chest as we exchanged nervous glances. Without a word, we approached the hidden door, the air growing colder with each step. I reached out to push it open, my hand trembling, revealing a narrow passageway leading to a second room. The room was small and cramped, the walls lined with shelves holding an array of odd artifacts, candles, bones, and strange symbols etched into the wood. In the center stood a dusty wooden table, upon which lay a collection of old photographs. I picked one up, my eyes widening in horror as I realized the faces of the children had been deliberately cut out, leaving blank, empty spaces where their expressions once were. My stomach churned, the unsettling sight gnawing at my sense of comfort. "Emily, look at this," I said, my voice strained. She stepped closer, her eyes scanning the photographs. Why would someone do this? Before we could ponder further, the silence was shattered by the sound of footsteps. Fast, frantic footsteps that seemed to be running beneath the tree. Yet the surrounding area was completely deserted. My blood ran cold as I turned to Emily, who looked equally terrified. "We need to get out of here," she whispered, grabbing my arm tightly. But as we turned to leave, the door slammed shut with a force that knocked us both to the ground. The room plunged into darkness, the only illumination coming from the eerie glow of the candles flickering on the table. The temperature plummeted, our breaths visible in the frigid air as an oppressive weight settled over us. Desperate to escape, I pushed against the door, but it wouldn't budge. The footsteps below grew louder, closer, accompanied by faint, ghostly laughter that sent chills down my spine. I felt an invisible presence pressing down on us, the air thick with an unspoken menace that made it impossible to move. The blank spaces in the photographs seemed to stare back at us, their emptiness a reflection of the void that now filled the room. "Emily, stay calm," I tried to reassure her, though my own fear was palpable. "We'll find a way out." As I searched the room for another exit, my eyes landed on an old book lying on the table. It was bound in cracked leather, its pages yellowed and brittle. I picked it up, flipping through the pages until I found an entry that sent a chill through my entire body. "In the depths of this sanctuary, we seek to bind the restless spirits to our will. The second room will ensure they remain, trapped in eternal silence." My heart raced as the realization dawned on me. We had uncovered a place where dark rituals had been performed, a place that sought to control and imprison the souls of children. The faces cut out of the photographs were not just vandalism. They were a symbol of the torment inflicted upon these innocent lives. Suddenly, the room began to shake, the symbols on the walls glowing with a sinister light as the oppressive energy intensified. The footsteps outside turned into a cacophony of screams and cries, the sounds of suffering that pierced through the night. I clutched the book tightly, feeling its dark power resonate with the room's malevolent energy. There's got to be a way to break this curse, I muttered, flipping through the book's pages in search of answers. Somewhere here. It must say how. Emily, trembling beside me, pointed to a passage that spoke of redemption and release, a way to free the spirits bound within the second room. It required a sacrifice, a letting go of our own fears and the pain that held us back. I looked into Emily's eyes, seeing the determination that mirrored my own. "Let's do it," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos around us. "We have to help them." Following the instructions, we began to recite the incantations written in the book, our voices intertwining with the haunting sounds of the forest outside. The symbols on the walls responded, their light dimming as the dark energy began to dissipate. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a sense of calm that enveloped the room. As we reached the final words of the ritual, the photographs on the table began to transform. The blank spaces filled with the faces of the children, their expressions no longer empty but filled with gratitude and peace. The ghostly presence that had tormented us softened, the malice giving way to a serene light that bathed the room in warmth. "Thank you," the spirits seemed to whisper, their voices now filled with relief and happiness. "You've set us free." With those final words, the door to the second room swung open, the path to freedom now clear. We stood up, the room around us shimmering with a residual light as the spirits departed, their souls finally finding the peace they had long sought. We descended the ladder, the oppressive energy completely gone, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves and the soft glow of twilight filtering through the trees. As we left the treehouse behind, the feeling of unease that had plagued us was replaced by a sense of accomplishment and relief. We had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, the spirits of the second room no longer bound to our world. Driving back to the farmhouse, the first light of dawn breaking through the horizon, I reflected on the night's events. The treehouse, once a symbol of childhood joy, had transformed into a place of redemption and closure. Emily squeezed my hand, her eyes reflecting the same sense of peace that now settled over us. "Do you think it will stay like this?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "I believe so," I replied, the memory of the spirits' gratitude etched into my heart. We gave them the peace they deserved. Years have passed since that night in Maine, but the memory of the second room and the spirits we helped remains vivid in my mind. The treehouse stands as a testament to the enduring power of compassion and the ability to confront and overcome the darkness that resides within forgotten places. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the leaves and the first light of dawn filters through the branches, I can almost hear the faint echoes of laughter and whispers, a lingering reminder that some stories never truly fade, but live on in the hearts of those who remember. Story number 3. Whispers of the White Shadow. I've always been drawn to the mysteries that lie hidden within nature's embrace, the secrets that forests guard under their thick canopies and the stories that time forgets. So when I heard about the abandoned treehouse deep within the Colorado wilderness, I couldn't resist the urge to explore. Nestled in the heart of a dense pine forest, the treehouse had become the stuff of local legend, a place where the veil between the living and the dead seemed impossibly thin. It was a crisp autumn morning when I set out for the treehouse. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced across the forest floor. I packed my essentials, a sturdy flashlight, a notebook, my camera, and a few snacks. The idea was simple enough: document the treehouse, uncover the truth behind the tales of the White Shadow, and perhaps debunk the myths that frighten the locals. As I drove along the narrow, winding roads that led into the wilderness, the landscape transformed from rolling hills to towering pines that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the heavens. The air was cool, tinged with the scent of pine and the earthy aroma of fallen leaves. Birds chirped overhead, their songs a stark contrast to the silence that awaited me deeper in the forest. After hours of hiking, I finally reached the clearing where the treehouse stood. It was perched high in an old oak tree, its wooden planks weathered and worn by years of neglect. Vines crept up the sides, and the once vibrant paint had faded to a dull, peeling gray. The structure looked fragile, as if it could collapse under the slightest pressure. Yet it stood resilient against the test of time. I approached cautiously, my flashlight cutting through the dappled sunlight that filtered through the branches. The treehouse seemed almost out of place in its serene setting, a relic of happier times now overshadowed by the whispers of the past. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead, and began to climb the rickety ladder. As I ascended, the forest seemed to hold its breath, the usual sounds of wildlife subdued as if the trees themselves were watching. Reaching the top, I pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Dust particles floated in the beam of my flashlight, creating an ethereal glow that added to the eerie atmosphere. The treehouse was small but cozy, furnished with remnants of its former life, old toys scattered across the floor, a tattered blanket draped over a makeshift bed, and faded drawings on the walls. It was a snapshot of childhood innocence now tainted by abandonment. I set up my camera and notebook, eager to document every detail, but an unsettling feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. As I explored further, the whispers began. At first, they were faint, almost imperceptible, a soft murmur that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "Leave, leave now," the voices seemed to chant, their tone urgent and pleading. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The air grew colder, and the shadows deepened, as if the darkness itself was pressing in around me. Determined to uncover the source, I followed the whispers to a small window overlooking the forest. It was there that I saw her, a figure clad in a flowing white dress, standing motionless in the treehouse below. Her presence was both haunting and beautiful, her eyes hollow yet filled with a sorrow that pierced through me. She raised her hand, pointing directly at me, her gaze unwavering. I took a step back, my mind racing with questions. Who was she? Why was she here? The local legends spoke of a woman who had vanished without a trace, her spirit forever bound to the treehouse. Some said she was a mother who lost her children in a tragic accident. Others believed she was a victim of foul play, her restless soul seeking justice. The truth was shrouded in mystery, and now I was face to face with the embodiment of those unanswered questions. As I stood there, trying to make sense of what I was witnessing, the whispers grew louder, the voices overlapping in a cacophony of fear and despair. The woman began to move, her form becoming more translucent, her presence more ethereal. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I tried to touch her, but my hand passed through her like mist, leaving me cold and empty-handed. Panic surged through me as the treehouse seemed to come alive, the walls pulsating with dark energy. The temperature dropped further, my breath visible in the freezing air as the whispers turned into agonized cries. "Help us! Release us!" the voices echoed, their pleas intertwining with the sorrowful wails that filled the space. Desperate to help, I began to recite a prayer I remembered from childhood, hoping to offer solace to the tormented spirit. The words felt heavy on my tongue, the act of speaking them a beacon of light in the enveloping darkness. As I continued, the oppressive energy began to lift, the whispers softening into a harmonious chorus of gratitude and peace. The woman's form began to shimmer, her features softening as the sorrow in her eyes gave way to a serene expression. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now filled with relief and hope. "You've set us free." With those final words, her figure dissolved into the light, the treehouse bathed in a warm, golden glow that dispelled the lingering darkness. The air grew lighter, the cold replaced by a gentle warmth that wrapped around me like a comforting embrace. The whispers ceased, replaced by the soothing sounds of the forest that now seemed alive with a renewed sense of peace. I sat down, overwhelmed by the experience, my heart swelling with a mixture of relief and reverence. The treehouse, once a place of fear and mystery, now stood as a testament to the power of compassion and understanding. The spirits had found the peace they had long sought, their stories finally heard and honored. As dawn broke, casting its first light through the trees, I packed up my gear, the memory of that night etched into my very being. The treehouse had revealed its secrets, and I had played a part in bringing closure to restless souls bound by tragedy. Driving away from the forest, the sun rising over the horizon, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and peace. Years later, the story of my encounter with the white shadow of the treehouse became a defining moment in my life, a chilling reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the supernatural. I often find myself reflecting on that night, the whispers of the past that still linger in my mind, and the enduring power of empathy in the face of darkness. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the trees and the first light of dawn filters through the leaves, I can almost hear the faint echoes of laughter and gratitude, a lingering whisper that ensures the spirits of the treehouse are never truly forgotten, forever free from the shadows that once held them captive. Story number 4. Stranger in the Treehouse. I've always found solace in the quiet corners of Georgia's sprawling forests, where the whispers of the past mingle with the rustling leaves. Growing up in a small town nestled on the edge of these woods, my childhood was defined by adventures and secrets shared among friends. Among the many memories that linger, one stands out: the treehouse we built together, affectionately known as the Haven. It was our sanctuary, perched high in an old oak, offering a panoramic view of the endless canopy below. The Haven was more than just a structure. It was the heart of our friendship. Summers were spent crafting elaborate stories. Nights were filled with whispered dreams, and every creak of the wooden planks beneath us felt like a promise of eternal camaraderie. But one fateful night changed everything, leaving scars that time couldn't erase. It was late August, the air thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and the distant hum of cicadas. My friends Tom, Sarah, and Mike and I had gathered in the Haven for one last sleepover before summer's end. The sky was a canvas of twilight hues, the first stars beginning to twinkle as dusk settled in. We laughed and reminisced, sharing stories of our grandest adventures, oblivious to the darkness that was about to descend. As midnight approached, a heavy fog began to roll in, enveloping the forest in an ethereal blanket. The temperature dropped sharply, the once warm air now biting cold. We huddled together, the flickering light of a single lantern casting long shadows around us. It was then that we heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from below, as if someone or something was clawing at the entrance of the Haven. Probably just a raccoon, Tom suggested, trying to steady his voice, but the scratching persisted, growing louder and more deliberate. Sarah, always the bravest, peered out of the small window, her eyes straining to pierce the thickening mist. "There's someone out there," she whispered, her voice trembling. Before any of us could react, a figure emerged from the fog, a man, tall and gaunt, his clothes tattered and stained, his eyes burned an unnatural red. Glowing eerily in the dim light, he stood motionless for a moment, staring up at us with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "Who are you?" Mike called out, his bravado faltering. The man didn't respond. Instead, he lifted a hand, palm outward, and we felt an invisible force pressing down on us, making it hard to breathe. The air around us seemed to thrum with a dark energy, the lantern flickering violently as if caught in a whirlwind. "We need to leave," Sarah urged, her voice edged with fear. But as we scrambled to climb down from the Haven, the man began to move, his movements slow and deliberate. His eyes never left ours, the red glow intensifying, casting a sinister light on his hollow face. "Leave now," the whispers seemed to say, carried by a wind that wasn't there. Panic set in as we descended the rickety ladder, the ground beneath us obscured by the thick fog. The man followed, his presence unnerving, his gaze piercing through the darkness. We ran blindly, the forest around us a maze of shadows and uncertainty. the sounds of our frantic footsteps echoing like desperate pleas. Branches whipped against our faces, the cold biting into our skin as we stumbled through the underbrush. The man's laughter, low and menacing, resonated through the trees, a haunting melody that chased us relentlessly. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder of the nightmare unfolding around us. We didn't stop until we reached the edge of the forest. The town lights a distant beacon of safety. Gasping for breath, we collapsed onto the grass. The man standing at the edge of the trees, watching us with those hellish eyes. As quickly as he had appeared, he vanished into the fog, leaving behind an oppressive silence that pressed down on us like a physical weight. In the days that followed, the memory of that night haunted us. Sleep eluded me, dreams filled with the man's red eyes and the echo of his sinister laughter. We tried to rationalize what had happened, but the fear lingered, constant shadow in our lives. The haven stood silent, its once vibrant spirit now tainted by the darkness we had encountered. Driven by a need for answers, I delved into the town's history, uncovering tales of unexplained disappearances and tragedies that had plagued the area for decades. Legends spoke of a spirit, a restless soul seeking vengeance or perhaps peace, trapped between worlds. His appearance a harbinger of doom for those who crossed his path. The symbols etched into the haven's walls matched those described in old folklore. Their meanings lost but their power undeniable. Determined to confront the darkness, I organized a group meeting with Tom, Sarah, and Mike. We need to go back, I insisted, to the haven, to understand what happened and maybe put things to rest. Reluctantly, they agreed, the bond of our friendship stronger than the fear that still gripped us. One night, under a moonless sky, we returned to the haven, the air heavy with anticipation and dread. Armed with candles, protective charms, and a newfound resolve, we prepared to face the entity that had terrorized us. As we entered the haven, the atmosphere shifted, the air thick with an oppressive energy. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with life, their dark meanings awakening as we began our ritual. We lit the candles, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows around us, and recited the incantations we had painstakingly uncovered. The temperature plummeted, the lanterns casting long, ghostly shadows as the room seemed to close in around us. The man's laughter echoed through the space, his red eyes appearing once more, burning with an intensity that threatened to consume us. "Leave now," he whispered, his voice a chilling breeze that sent shivers down my spine. But we stood our ground, our voices unwavering as we continued the ritual. The symbols on the walls glowed brightly, the dark energy breaking apart as the light of our incantations pierced through the shadows. The man's form began to shimmer, his presence weakening as the ritual gained strength. A surge of energy filled the room, the oppressive weight lifting as the spirit was finally confronted. "Peace," I commanded, my voice strong despite the fear that still lingered. "We honor your memory and release you from this place." The man's figure began to dissolve, his red eyes fading as the darkness that bound him was shattered by our collective will. The room brightened, the symbols losing their ominous glow as the spirit found the peace he had long sought. With a final, haunting smile, he vanished, leaving behind a serene stillness that enveloped the haven. Exhausted but victorious, we left the haven behind, the bond of our friendship strengthened by the ordeal we had endured. The haven stood silent once more, its dark history acknowledged and its restless spirit finally at peace. The memory of that night lingered, a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown and the enduring power of friendship and courage in the face of darkness. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the story of the haven and the stranger's red eyes remains a cautionary tale in our town. We speak of it in hushed tones, a reminder to respect the past and the unseen forces that dwell within the shadows. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the trees and the moon casts a silver glow on the forest floor, I can almost hear the faint echoes of laughter, a lingering whisper that ensures the spirit of the haven is never forgotten. forever watching over the place that was once our sanctuary. Story number 5. Echoes in the Cypress Shadows. I've always been fascinated by the stories that lurk in the shadows, the whispers of the past that refuse to fade away. So when I heard about the mysterious treehouse deep within the dense cypress forests near New Orleans, Louisiana, my curiosity was instantly piqued. Nestled on the outskirts of the city, where the bayous intertwine with the remnants of old plantations, the treehouse stood as a haunting relic of forgotten rituals and untold tragedies. It was a humid August evening when I decided to investigate. Armed with my camera, a sturdy flashlight, and a notebook, I set out with a sense of purpose. The locals spoke of eerie songs carried by the wind and strange symbols etched into the wood of the treehouse, warning outsiders to stay away. But for me, the allure of uncovering the truth was too strong to resist. The journey to the treehouse was treacherous. The narrow paths obscured by overgrown vegetation and the thick fog that rolled in from the bayou. As I trekked deeper into the forest, the sounds of New Orleans faded, replaced by the symphony of nocturnal creatures and the distant croak of frogs. The air was thick with moisture, the scent of moss and decay permeating every breath. After what felt like hours, I finally caught sight of the treehouse, a small, handcrafted structure perched precariously among the gnarled branches of an ancient cypress tree. The wood was dark and weathered, covered in intricate carvings of symbols that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The windows were shuttered tight, but the dim light filtering through suggested someone or something was inside. I approached cautiously, the crunch of dry leaves underfoot the only sound that broke the oppressive silence. As I drew closer, the unmistakable sound of singing reached my ears, a haunting melody that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the treehouse. The song was ethereal, beautiful yet sorrowful, pulling me towards the structure with an irresistible force. Summoning my courage, I reached out to knock on the door, but before my hand could make contact, the singing ceased abruptly. The sudden silence was deafening, the air growing colder as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to turn back, but something deep within pushed me forward. I pushed open the door, the hinges creaking loudly in the stillness. The interior was dimly lit, shadows dancing across the walls as my flashlight beam swept the room. The treehouse was sparsely furnished, with a single wooden chair facing a small altar adorned with candles and strange artifacts. The symbols from the exterior were etched into every surface, their meanings lost to time but their power undeniable. As I stepped inside, a chill ran down my spine. The atmosphere was thick with an oppressive energy, the air heavy with the scent of burning wax and something far more sinister. I began to document the space, my camera capturing every detail, every symbol that seemed to hold a piece of the town's dark history. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps echoing through the treehouse. Slow and deliberate, my heart raced as I turned towards the source, the flashlight beam darting across the room. There was no one there, only the lingering scent of incense and the faint trace of blood on the altar. Panic set in as I realized I wasn't alone, that something malevolent was watching me from the shadows. I decided to leave, but as I turned to exit, the door slammed shut with a force that sent me sprawling to the ground. The room erupted in chaos. Candles flickered wildly, casting grotesque shadows that twisted and writhed along the walls. The symbols on the surfaces began to glow with an eerie light, the air vibrating with dark energy that threatened to pull me back into the depths of the treehouse. Desperate to escape, I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing as invisible forces pressed against me from all sides. The temperature dropped further, my breath visible in the icy air as the malevolent presence intensified. The symbols on the walls began to pulse, the light growing brighter, illuminating the room in a blinding flash that momentarily obscured everything. When my vision cleared, I was no longer inside the treehouse. Instead, I found myself standing in the midst of a long-abandoned plantation, the air thick with the echoes of past horrors. The sounds of the singing had returned, louder and more sorrowful, mingling with the distant cries of unseen beings. I wandered through the decaying buildings, each step bringing me closer to the heart of the darkness that had consumed this place. In the center of the plantation stood a grand mansion, its windows shattered, the roof caved in from years of neglect. As I approached, the singing reached a fever pitch, the melody now a cacophony of pain and despair. I entered the mansion, my flashlight illuminating the grand foyer where portraits of stern-faced ancestors stared down at me with hollow eyes. At the end of the hall, I found the source of the haunting song, a small, decrepit music room where a grand piano stood covered in dust. The keys moved on their own, playing the sorrowful melody without any human touch. As I watched in horror, ghostly figures began to materialize around the room, families long dead, their faces etched with anguish and regret. One spirit, a woman in a tattered dress, stepped forward, her eyes pleading for help. "You must free us," she whispered, her voice echoing through the room. "We are bound by the darkness that consumed our souls." I realized then that the treehouse was more than just an abandoned structure. It was a gateway, a portal that held the trapped spirits of those who had suffered in this cursed land. The symbols were part of a dark ritual that had gone horribly wrong, trapping the souls of the innocent and the wicked alike in an eternal state of torment. Determined to break the curse and release the spirits, I began to search for clues within the mansion. I found old journals and letters that detailed the rise and fall of the plantation, the tragedies that had befallen the families, and the dark practices that had led to their undoing. It became clear that the only way to free the spirits was to confront the source of the darkness, an ancient altar hidden in the basement, where the final ritual had been performed. As I descended the creaking stairs, the oppressive energy intensified, the air thick with the weight of countless souls yearning for release. The basement was vast, filled with relics of dark rituals, candles, pentagrams, and blood-stained cloths that told a story of desperation and malevolence. In the center stood the altar, its surface covered in ancient symbols that pulsed with dark energy. I knew what I had to do. Drawing from the journals, I began to recite the incantations that would reverse the ritual, the words flowing from my lips with a mix of fear and determination. The symbols on the altar began to glow, the dark energy swirling around me as the spirits watched with hope and trepidation. The air grew colder, the ground beneath me trembling as the power of the ritual took hold. The spirits began to chant alongside me, their voices merging with mine in a harmonious plea for peace. The symbols on the altar flared brightly, the darkness breaking apart as the light of the incantation pierced through the shadows. A blinding flash enveloped the basement, the dark energy dissipating as the curse was lifted. The spirits, now free from their torment, began to fade, their forms dissolving into the light that now filled the room. The oppressive atmosphere lifted entirely, replaced by a serene stillness that signaled the end of their suffering. Exhausted but fulfilled, I made my way back to the treehouse, the memory of the night's events etched into my very soul. The singing had ceased, the dark symbols now dull and lifeless. The treehouse stood silent, its purpose fulfilled, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of compassion and understanding. Driving away from the cypress forest, the first light of dawn breaking through the mist, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and peace. The spirits of Centralia were finally at rest, their stories honored and their suffering ended. The legends of the haunted treehouse had been more than just ghost stories. They were a reminder that some places hold secrets too dark to be forgotten. Yet, with the right intent, even the most tormented souls can find their peace. Years have passed since that fateful night in the Black Hills, but the memory of the treehouse and the spirits I helped set free remains vivid in my mind. I often find myself reflecting on the thin veil that separates our world from the supernatural, and the responsibility we bear to honor the memories of those who came before us. The treehouse stands as a silent sentinel, its haunting beauty a testament to the lives lost and the spirits that were finally liberated from their eternal torment. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the cypress trees and the morning light filters through the branches. I can almost hear the faint echoes of the children's laughter, a lingering whisper that ensures their stories are never forgotten, forever etched into the heart of Black Hills. Story number 6. Echoes in the Oak. I've always believed that the past has a way of clinging to places, seeping into the very soil and whispering through the leaves. Growing up in suburban Oregon, surrounded by the comforting predictability of modern life, I found solace in nature's timeless embrace. So when my wife, Laura, and I decided to build a treehouse for our 2 children, Emma and Jake, it felt like the perfect blend of childhood nostalgia and creating lasting memories. Little did we know, our quaint oak tree in the backyard held secrets darker than we could ever imagine. The project began in late spring, the air warm and fragrant with blooming wildflowers. Emma and Jake were ecstatic, their eyes gleaming with excitement as we sketched out the plans. The old oak, sturdy and majestic, stood sentinel in our garden, its branches sprawling out like protective arms. We envisioned weekends filled with laughter, games, and the simple joy of climbing to our private sanctuary among the leaves. As summer rolled in, the treehouse took shape. Laura and I worked tirelessly, sawing, hammering, and nailing, while Emma and Jake eagerly handed us tools and fetched supplies. By midsummer, the structure was complete, a charming wooden retreat with a small porch, sturdy railings, and enough space for the kids to let their imaginations run wild. The first night we spent there was magical, the stars twinkling above and the sounds of the evening forest creating a symphony of natural lullabies. But as the days turned into weeks, subtle changes began to unsettle our peaceful routine. It started with the knocking. First, it was faint, almost imperceptible soft taps that seemed to come from the treehouse itself. We dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on our ears, the sounds of branches rubbing against the wooden planks. Yet, night after night, the knocking persisted, growing slightly louder and more deliberate. Laura, ever the pragmatic one, attributed it to settling wood or perhaps small animals seeking refuge. I tried to remain skeptical, focusing instead on the joy our children found in their new play space. However, the unease began to gnaw at me, a persistent shadow that refused to be ignored. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness enveloped our backyard, Laura shared something that sent chills down my spine. "I saw them," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Children, waving from the window of the treehouse." My heart skipped a beat. The idea of ghosts was laughable, a figment of horror novels and late-night movies. Yet, Laura's expression was one of genuine fear and confusion, determined to understand. I approached the treehouse, the fading light casting long shadows that seemed to dance with a life of their own. The window was dark, the curtains drawn tightly shut. I knocked gently, the sound echoing ominously through the silent night. No response. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of wood and summer air mingling with an inexplicable chill. The interior was as we had left it, cozy and inviting, adorned with colorful cushions and handmade decorations. But something felt off, an intangible presence that made the hairs on my neck stand on end. As I explored, the knocking ceased, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed down on me. I decided to leave, but as I turned to exit, I caught a fleeting glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadowy figure darting across the room. My breath hitched, and I spun around, but the treehouse remained empty. Panic surged through me as I rushed out, Laura's worried gaze meeting mine. "We need to figure out what's happening," I declared, trying to mask my fear. Laura nodded, her face pale but resolute. We spent the next few days researching, scouring old records and local archives for any mention of our oak tree or previous residents. What we discovered was a grim history buried beneath layers of time and neglect. The land our house stood on had once been home to a small, thriving community in the early 1900s. Among the many stories was one that stood out. a tragic account of a family who had lived in a house adjacent to what would later become our backyard. The patriarch, a miner named Henry Caldwell, had been found dead under mysterious circumstances one winter night. The official report cited natural causes, but whispers of foul play and dark rituals had long persisted among the locals. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, we decided to dig deeper. We visited the local historical society, speaking with elderly residents who remembered stories passed down through generations. One name kept surfacing: Eleanor Caldwell, Henry's wife. According to legend, Eleanor had been a recluse, rumored to dabble in forbidden practices in her quest to save her family from the relentless hardships of mining life. Her obsession had driven her to the brink of madness, culminating in a night of terror that had left the town scarred. Armed with this new information, Laura and I felt a mix of dread and responsibility. We returned to the treehouse, determined to confront whatever presence lingered within. That night, as the wind howled outside and the moon cast an otherworldly glow through the broken branches, we sat together in the treehouse, Emma and Jake sleeping peacefully below. The familiar knocking began, louder and more insistent than ever. This time, we didn't dismiss it. Instead, we braced ourselves, ready to face whatever lay beyond the wooden walls. As the clock struck midnight, the room grew inexplicably cold, frost forming on the window panes despite the mild weather. The air thickened with an oppressive energy, making it difficult to breathe. Suddenly, the door to the treehouse slammed shut, the sound reverberating through the silent night. We exchanged fearful glances as the room plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the eerie glow of the moon. The whispers returned, their voices overlapping in a desperate plea. "Leave, leave now." Laura reached out, taking my hand in hers, her grip steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We need to help her," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Eleanor Caldwell. She's still here, trapped by her grief and madness, determined to bring peace to the restless spirit." We began to recite the prayers and protective incantations we had found in the historical records. The air shimmered with a palpable tension as the spirits of the past converged around us, their forms flickering like candle flames in the wind. The shadowy figure of Eleanor Caldwell materialized before us, her eyes hollow with sorrow and rage. "Why won't you leave us alone?" she demanded, her voice echoing through the treehouse. "I did everything for my family. I couldn't bear to lose them." Laura stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "We understand your pain, Eleanor. We're here to help you find peace, to let go of the torment that binds you to this place." The spirit hesitated, the anger in her eyes slowly giving way to a deep, unending sorrow. "Peace, how?" We continued the ritual, our voices blending with the whispers of the past, creating a harmonious symphony of healing and closure. The room grew warmer, the oppressive energy lifting as Eleanor's form began to soften, the lines of pain and desperation smoothing into a serene expression. Tears welled up in her spectral eyes as she reached out once more. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice now filled with genuine gratitude. "You've freed us from our suffering." With those final words, Eleanor dissolved into a cascade of light. The treehouse bathed in a peaceful glow that signaled the end of the torment. The oppressive silence was replaced by a tranquil stillness, the air clear and warm as if the very essence of peace had settled within the wooden walls. We sat together in the aftermath, the weight of the night's events settling comfortably around us. The treehouse, once a place of fear and mystery, now stood as a beacon of hope and healing. The knocking had ceased, the whispers silenced by the newfound peace that enveloped our home. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in our backyard transformed. The air was lighter, the sounds of the forest more harmonious, and the treehouse seemed to radiate a gentle warmth that invited joy rather than fear. Emma and Jake returned to their play with renewed enthusiasm, their laughter a sweet melody that filled the air with life once more. Reflecting on our experience, Laura and I realized that the past, no matter how dark, could be acknowledged and healed through understanding and compassion. The spirits of those lost souls, like Eleanor Caldwell, had found the peace they so desperately sought. Their stories finally heard and honored. Years later, the treehouse remains a cherished part of our family, a symbol of resilience and the enduring power of love and empathy. The legends of our haunted treehouse have faded into the background, replaced by the happy memories created within its walls. Yet, on quiet nights, when the wind rustles through the oak's branches and the stars twinkle brightly above, I can still feel the lingering echoes of the past, a gentle reminder that some stories never truly fade, but live on in the hearts of those who remember. And sometimes, when I watch Emma and Jake play under the canopy of the old oak, I catch a fleeting glimpse of laughter carried by the breeze, a whisper of gratitude from the spirits we helped set free, forever grateful for the peace we brought to their restless souls. Story number 7. Whispers from the Canopy. I've always been fascinated by the tales that linger in the shadows, the stories whispered among the rustling leaves of ancient forests. So when I heard about the treehouse deep within Black Hills, South Dakota, a relic of childhood joy turned into a site of unspeakable tragedy, I knew I had to uncover its secrets. As a freelance writer with a penchant for the paranormal, the story of the vanished children and the eerie laughter that still echoes from the abandoned structure called to me like a siren's song. It was a crisp October morning when I set out for Black Hills, the air tinged with the scent of pine and the promise of autumn. My destination was a secluded area within the dense forest, far from the well-trodden trails and into the heart of nature's embrace. The treehouse, once a vibrant playground for local children, now stood as a hollow testament to a day that changed everything. The drive was long, the landscape shifting from rolling hills to thick woodlands where the sunlight struggled to penetrate the canopy. As I ventured deeper into the forest, the world around me seemed to grow quieter, the sounds of civilization fading until only the whispers of the wind through the trees remained. I navigated my way to an overgrown path, the remnants of the trail barely visible beneath layers of fallen leaves and encroaching underbrush. After hours of trekking, I finally reached the clearing where the treehouse stood. It was perched high in a sturdy oak, its wooden planks weathered and worn by years of neglect. The structure, once vibrant with laughter and life, now loomed ominously against the gray sky, its windows dark and empty. A chill ran down my spine as I approached, the memory of the vanished children's laughter echoing in my mind. I set up my camera and notebook, the tools of my trade ready to capture whatever mysteries lay within. The forest around me was silent, the only sounds the distant call of an owl and the soft rustling of leaves. As I climbed the rickety ladder to the treehouse, the air grew colder, the atmosphere thick with an unspoken tension that made every step feel heavier than the last. Inside, the treehouse was a shadow of its former self. Dust lay thick on every surface, and cobwebs adorned the corners like delicate lace. The small space felt suffocating, the walls closing in with the weight of untold stories. I began to explore, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, illuminating remnants of childhood, faded drawings on the walls, old toys scattered across the floor, and a single, broken window that offered a glimpse into the stormy sky outside. As I delved deeper, the temperature seemed to drop even further, my breath visible in the icy air. It was then that I heard it, a faint, eerie laughter that echoed through the treehouse, bouncing off the walls with a haunting resonance. My heart pounded in my chest as I spun around, searching for the source of the sound. But the room remained empty. The laughter lingered, a ghostly reminder of the lives that once filled the space with joy. Determined to document the phenomenon, I set up my equipment, positioning my camera to capture any signs of activity. I sat down on the creaky floorboards, my notebook open to record my observations. As the minutes ticked by, the laughter continued, growing louder and more distinct. Yet no form materialized to accompany the sound. It was as if the very walls were crying out in sorrow, their voices blending with the whispers of the forest outside. Suddenly, The air grew thick with an oppressive energy. The atmosphere charged with a malevolent presence that made my skin crawl. Shadows seemed to dance at the edges of my vision, fleeting shapes that vanished when I turned to look. The laughter transformed into desperate whispers, their words indistinct yet filled with anguish. "Leave, leave now." Panic set in as I realized that something unnatural was unfolding within the treehouse. The oppressive energy pressed down on me, making it difficult to breathe. As the whispers grew louder, their message clear and insistent, I tried to rationalize the experience, telling myself it was just the wind or the remnants of old memories. But the fear gripping me left no room for doubt. Desperate to escape, I rushed to the window, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Outside, the forest was a swirling vortex of shadows and snow, the trees seemingly alive with unseen forces. The laughter and whispers followed me, their voices echoing through the night like spectral entities seeking refuge. I scrambled down the ladder, my heart racing as I fled the treehouse, the sounds of torment chasing me into the cold embrace of the forest. As I stumbled through the underbrush, the whispers persisted, their voices a relentless reminder of the tragedy that had befallen the town. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that the spirits of the lost children were still bound to the treehouse, their suffering etched into the very fabric of the forest. The moon cast a pale glow on the snow-covered ground, guiding me back to the safety of my car. But the memories of that night lingered like a shadow, haunting my every step. Back in civilization, I reviewed the footage, my hands trembling as I watched the eerie laughter captured on camera. There was no sign of movement or apparitions, only the sound that defied explanation, a ghostly echo of lives lost to the unforgiving wilderness. The notebook was filled with frantic scribbles, the words barely coherent amidst the fear and adrenaline that had consumed me. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits of Garnet's lost children were still reaching out, their whispers echoing in my mind as I tried to piece together the events that had unfolded. The story of the treehouse became more than just a tale of abandoned structures and lost lives. It was a haunting reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead, and the enduring power of unresolved sorrow. Determined to give the spirits a voice and honor their memory, I returned to Black Hills, seeking out the families of the lost children and delving deeper into the town's tragic history. The more I learned, the more I understood the depth of the curse that had claimed Garnet. A curse born from despair and the unrelenting grip of nature's wrath. The treehouse stood as a symbol of that tragedy, a beacon for restless souls seeking closure that could never be found in life. One night, driven by a sense of duty and compassion, I returned to the treehouse, armed with offerings of candles and personal mementos, hoping to provide a semblance of peace to the tortured spirits. As I arranged the items, the oppressive energy lifted slightly, the whispers softening into a harmonious chorus of gratitude. The laughter transformed into a gentle melody, the spirits acknowledging my presence and my attempt to honor their memory. As the first light of dawn broke through the stormy sky, the treehouse seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the darkness receding as the spirits found the peace they had long sought. The oppressive atmosphere lifted entirely, replaced by a serene stillness that enveloped the forest. The whispers had ceased, the laughter now a distant echo of the joy that once filled the treehouse with life. Driving away from Black Hills, the memory of that night remained etched into my soul, a testament to the enduring power of compassion and understanding in the face of tragedy. The treehouse stood as a silent sentinel, its haunting beauty a reminder of the lives lost and the spirits that had been finally set free. The legends of Garnet were no longer just ghost stories but a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring connection between the living and the dead. Years have passed since my encounter with the haunted treehouse, but the whispers of Garnet's lost children still echo in my mind, a lingering reminder of the night I helped them find their peace. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the forest and the snow blankets the earth in silent stillness, I can almost hear their faint laughter, a haunting echo that ensures their stories are never forgotten. forever etched into the heart of Black Hills.